All right, guys, so today we're going to be taking a photo from this to this. Now, you can see this is just another travel photo, but it has a variety of problems. So it has first some lens distortion that you can see this rounded attribute happening here around the edges of the photo. So we're going to need to fix that. Then once we fix that, then we're going to need to adjust the hue and saturation of our background. Although you notice that the couple here in the front, yes, that is me and my wife, are still pretty dark. So we're going to then add a curves layer to be able to affect just the couple, albeit we're going to create a mask that then masks that out. And then we'll add a little saturation back into them using another adjustment layer. So that will, all in all, take us from looking like this to looking like this. Let's go ahead and jump over into our photo and get going. So first, as always, I've got my background. Command J is going to create a new copy of that. I'm going to turn off that background layer, and this is my original. So now with this original, I want to go to my filter lens correction. So filter lens correction, or Shift Command R, is going to bring up this option to correct this lens distortion. So I'm actually going to come over here to custom and click on this custom, and you'll see this geometric distortion and the option to remove it. So I'm going to grab this, and as I start to pull it to the side, you'll notice that it's really automatically correcting for that lens distortion. So I'm going to pull it just up here to about 50, and 50 flattens a whole lot of that out. Now you'll notice if you try to go farther, you lose some of it. So I'm going to just set that back at 50 and remove as much of the distortion as I can. So that's looking a lot better already. I'm going to hit OK. And that's going to get us back to a nice even level here. Now let's go ahead and I'm going to select this couple. So let's do a select subject and see how good it does at finding this particular couple. And sure enough, it does a pretty good job. Now we've got a little bit of strangeness here, so we could switch to any of our selection tools to remove this. I'm going to zoom in just a hair, no pun intended. And let's try to remove just these last little bits. I'm going to hold down the Option key and try to remove some of these things from the background. Hold down my Shift key and add a little bit of that back in. Just make sure I'm getting her hair. Oops, don't want that little piece, so I'm going to remove that. And let's remove these things from these people too. So little bits of hair. I feel like mostly it's going okay. I could try to remove that little piece. I could, if I wanted to be really specific, hold my Option key down. You'll notice I'm using a very tiny brush size, very tiny, and then I could try to grab this. But overall, I feel like that's actually doing pretty good. So Command 0 puts it back, and now I've got my people separated out nice and clean. So now I feel like they're taking up space in the shot just fine. But if we look back over at our next one, you'll notice that we added a variety of different hue and saturation layers. So this first hue and saturation layer, you'll notice that we've got a mask on it. And that mask means that it's only affecting everything that's not here, so everything that is painted white. So it's going to affect everything painted white, but the couple, because they're painted in black, so they're being excluded from it. If I were to right click on this and choose Disable Layer Mask, you'll see that now it's bumping the saturation up. I've grabbed the saturation and pushed it up quite a bit. So let's go ahead. I'm going to turn that back on, Enable Layer Mask, and let's go do that over here in ours. I want to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer, so I'm going to click on the new fill or adjustment layer, and I'm going to come up here to my hue and saturation. And when I put that up there, because I already had them selected, that it created a mask automatically. So because I had the people selected here, when I made this new layer, it automatically loaded it with a mask, painted almost everything black. So you'll notice now when I click and I pull the saturation up, oops, it's only saturating the people. So we now see that our mask actually needs to be inverted. Then I need to invert this mask. In other words, make the black parts white and the white parts black. Fortunately, Command I is the simplest way to invert something. So invert a selection, invert a mask. So it just changed it. So it went from everything black except for them, so they were the only ones being affected, to Command I. Now it's inverted. So now only the background is having its saturation affected. So if I push the saturation up, you'll see we get a lot more color, a lot more saturation popping out of this. And so, of course, they're being excluded. Now, that's actually pretty good. So if I look back over at my original master, I can tell that I would also like to be able to bring up the darkness, the darker parts of their image. So we're going to use curves and then probably add a little hue and saturation back. So in this case, I need to select them again. Now, fortunately, anything that still has their selection, like this mask, I can Command click on it. So hold the Command key down, click on that, and you see it makes that same selection. So now I want to do the same thing. I'm going to come to my adjustment layer, and let's add a curves adjustment layer. So with curves adjustment layer selected, you see it makes that curve and it makes it with the mask already selected. But of course we know the problem is now if I go and I adjust the curves, let's say I bring up the shadows, it's affecting only the background. So I'm actually going to select that mask and invert it again. So it's only bringing up, when I grab my curves layer, it's only bringing up what's not being masked. So in this case, that's this couple. So I can grab this curves layer. I'm going to come down here to, we can see there's lots of dark shadows in this selection. So if I grab down here in the darker parts of the area and I push those up a little bit, we can see that we've brought up the brightness of these people a lot. And I could always turn this off and on. I see we go from a very dark picture to much brighter. Now the problem is when we go adding this brightness, I'm just adding in a little more here in the darker area. When we add that brightness, they do look less saturated, less vibrant than the others. So let's just do one more. I'm going to do another. Let's option click to make a selection again. So now we've got them selected. And now I'm going to go and let's add one more like vibrance layer, which will also give us a little more option for saturation. And you can see it's also got this inverted mask. So it's only going to affect their layer. So if I grab that saturation and crank it, it's obviously been too much. But if I just pull it up just a little bit, give them a little bit of color back, and then maybe even pump the brightness just to get a little bit more out of those other colors. Not too much. But now we've gone from having this to having this. And it's already a much better looking photo. And I think that's going to be a dramatic improvement for the purposes we're going through today.